Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beer with the Boss. That podcaster guy and his boss have a beer after a long day of work and catch up on whatever's trending out there. I'm your old friend, Rodrigo Matos.
And I'm Joe Zamboni. So today we are here direct from Philadelphia to present the podcast. And first question, Rodrigo, what are you drinking?
That's a very important question, Joel. I'm drinking Lagunitas. It's a Californian beer that is now also brewed in South America. IPA, pretty standard beer, really good. How about you, Joe? Are you drinking anything today?
I drink Coke. That's a bad thing to do. But
That's
yeah,
something. That's something.
yeah, I drove this morning. It's raining here. But most important today, we have the first non-technical or how can I say, far from us guest. And I would like to introduce you to Veronika. Welcome, Veronika.
Thank you. Good to be here. And it's such an honor to be your first not technologist guest. So thank you for inviting me today.
Oh, thank you for
Thank you
accepting
for being
joining us.
here.
And as always, our first question, what are you drinking?
Yeah, so I'm drinking a non-alcoholic cocktail called the Ghia. It's really good. It's kind of my drink of choice when I'm trying to drink less wine.
It's awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers. And why don't you talk a little bit about you?
Sure. So I'm an HR leader. I work at a top 5 bank here in the United States, and I lead our employee engagement team. So we do the employee survey, all related programs, as well as other surveys and employee research to understand the employee experience and how we can help our employees to perform at their best, but also thrive at the bank. So I've been here for about 3 years. Before that, I did consulting earlier in my career. So I worked for Deloitte and 2 other consulting companies.
That's awesome. And also an important part, I think that you do is you help with Amelia Air, right? Dean last week was here and he's part of Amelia Air. He's one of the founders and you are one of the volunteers there. Thank you for helping there too.
Yeah, it's been a great experience, and it's fun to get to use my HR skills for a nonprofit. So I'm our volunteer coordinator and also the partnerships lead, which means that I work with the folks who would like to help out with Amelia Air. It's a very different experience engaging volunteers versus full-time employees. So that's been a really fun journey.
Yeah, I totally understand.
And yeah, Veronika, we heard something about someone named Toby. Would you care telling our audience who Toby is?
Absolutely. So Toby is my little dog. He's an Amelia Air passenger. So he flew on one of our volunteer flights during COVID, so almost 5 years ago at this point. And so he is also my boss. He's the one that tells me what time I get up, what time I go for walks, what time it's time to be done working. You know, whenever I talk about the big boss in my life, it's Toby because he is that figure.
So Veronika, what's the secret sauce of keeping people engaged, especially like a large scale team that it's different than a media, right? So what's the secret of keeping? We hope.
Yeah. If I had a simple answer to that question, first of all, I could make a killing advising other companies, but also I probably wouldn't have a job because we'd already know what to do. But I think when we think about engagement, there's a few what we call drivers. These are areas that if you focus on them, typically it'll impact the overall engagement sentiment of an employee population. And so one of them is purpose. So helping employees to understand how does their work tie into the bigger picture? Like how does their work tie into the strategy of the company or the organization, but also how are they making a difference on a bigger scale? I think another piece is the boss, right? So we're having beer with the boss today. The boss is a really important part of employee engagement, where your relationship with your boss, your ability to receive coaching from your boss and feel supported, but also challenged by your boss, like that's all very critical. And then there's pieces around understanding overall what's expected of you. And that ties into kind of both of those, understanding what your goals are and how they can be met. And that ties into the last piece, which is career. So if you feel like you have a trajectory at a company, whether it's becoming the CEO, whether it's staying in your role, but learning more and deepening your knowledge, it's important to feel that there's a path forward for you and that the way in which you want to learn and grow can be done at the company or organization that you're part of. And then we often get the question, well, what about total rewards? What about pay? What about benefits? And all of those things are important too, but they almost become more of a hygiene factor in the sense that if you're satisfied with your pay, you feel like it's fair, you're able to provide benefits for your family, then all of those other things are if I should say, if those things are not present, then everything else becomes less important, right? I'd say those are like the step one. We need to get these right, and then we can focus on the bigger picture.
Amazing. You know exactly what you're doing. That's for sure. And like in this point of the boss thing, do you like have this coaching the bosses and things like that? Like you do this work with them too?
So at a scale like ours, we have, I think, 10,000 people leaders at my company. So coaching each of them one-on-one would be tricky. So what we do instead is we offer trainings and we offer different opportunities for them to learn, whether self-directed or in a classroom setting, because I think it's important for someone to feel prepared to lead others when they step into that role. And that's not always a given. Sometimes we promote people from within because they have done a good job as an individual contributor. But to be able to be an effective people leader, they need a new set of skills that they previously didn't have. So that's one piece. I would say another thing is we give them the tools. We give leaders the tools to have those conversations with their employees to say what's working for you, what's not working for you, what can we change, and that change management is really ultimately what drives the value of an engagement survey.
It is an important thing. Like you have this person who wants to become a leader but they are too technical and then or they are very good technical and they become a very bad manager and they end up destroying their careers and things like that. Yeah, that's a
Totally.
very
It happens
important
all the time.
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Veronika, can I ask you, like most areas also have those like myths that people, those like truths that are not really necessarily true. Is there any like common myth that you would like to debunk when we talk about working with the employee engagement in such a large scale? Any specific myth comes to mind?
So you're basically looking to understand kind of what are some of the misconceptions or
Exactly.
misunderstood things about employee engagement. Yeah, I would say that sometimes people pivot too much on the role of the company or even the role of the leader. I think engagement is a team sport where I'm responsible for my own engagement, but also my leader is responsible for a piece of it and the bank is responsible for a piece of it. So I think understanding kind of that balance, there oftentimes I'll see companies pivot too much on one or the other, where it becomes almost like a what can the company do for you? Or what is the manager going to do about this, even if it's beyond their control? So that's one piece. I would say another thing too is that engagement is not just happiness at work. I think it often gets construed that way, but it's more than that. It's empowerment, it's purpose, it's being able to, at the end of the day, drive the mission of the organization, right? And we can be happy all we want. I mean, I'm very happy when I'm out at brunch with my friends, but that doesn't mean that I'm making any money for the company when I'm doing that, right? So I think there's that important element as well, where at the end of the day, we are here to fulfill the mission of the organization, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's a for-profit company.
There is, I think, a phrase that people say that people don't come for the money, come for the boss or something like that. There is you know this story?
I think I've heard various iterations of that. Like people don't quit companies, they quit bosses, or I
Exactly.
haven't heard the one
That's
about
the
the
one.
money. That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all probably been in a place where we've had really good leaders, and maybe we've been in a place where we've had not so good leaders. And I would say the leader does have a really big impact on a person's experience and their journey. So having a good leader and someone who is there for you, but also challenges you and gives you good goals and stretch opportunities is very valuable. But also, I think a toxic leader can create an environment where even good people will have a hard time sticking around, no matter how loyal they are to the organization and no matter how much money they make at the end of the day.
So it's not a misconception, it's a conception, a correct conception, right?
Well, I think there's nuance and there's balance to it, right? But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, yes, like leaders do matter, but they're not everything. They're not the whole picture.
Yeah, what I found interesting at the beginning of our conversation when we were explaining the whole engagement process is that you touched it in a way that like the basics are a given and then you have to make the organization work is not about the whole given, right? Is the whole I would say culture, like you help to create a real culture of engagement in the company that ends up producing a better outcome than just it's a different way to think the whole human resources, not thinking about being payroll and all the other simple things, but going way beyond and literally help the company to have a strong culture. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head with culture. Culture is key, right? And the culture of a company dictates a lot of those elements of employee experience. But also, I would say that why I love being in HR and why I picked this particular area of HR at this stage in my career is because I want to help people unlock their potential, right? I don't want people to just come to work and just do a job and feel like it doesn't matter or feel like they're not using their skills. I think each and every person has so much to offer that's oftentimes above and beyond what they're able to do in a given day.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Veronika, I want to ask you a little bit about cultural changes. I know that you've experienced live in different countries, even different parts of the US. Are there any specific cultural differences between different countries or inside the US that come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes people even underestimate the degree of cultural differences that there are in the United States. When I first started my career, I was working here in Minneapolis, but my client was a New York based company and they were just very East Coast, very New York. And so I remember as a 22-year-old, it was a little jarring for me because I'm like, why are they screaming all the time? But they weren't. They were just communicating the way they normally do. And everything was just a lot more emotive than what I was used to. And so that took some calibration. Years later, I was living in Virginia working with a client who was Minneapolis based, ironically enough. And it was the opposite experience, right? I was surrounded by people who were very DC. And then my client was very Midwestern and very like warm and fuzzy, kind of Minnesota nice. But then, of course, when you go abroad, there's even more of a difference, right? When we think about engagement surveys, we have to think about the way that employees respond is going to be a factor of their environment in some ways. And there's some countries where people's engagement scores will be lower because they're just kind of their culture is such that they will not tell you, yes, everything's amazing unless it's really amazing, right? If everything is just so, they're going to say so. And so that becomes interesting too as you look at scores from across different geographical locations and you start to layer that nuance on top of it to understand why are we seeing these differences and is it truly a factor of the employee experience or is it just a factor of the way that they do things in that country?
Yeah,
Wow.
that is interesting point. And like I remember when I started working with international projects, my first experience was with Argentina, which doesn't change much as like Brazil is not that different culture. But when I started working with Mexicans, they have a so like hierarchical organization that they will not do anything if their boss didn't authorize or things like that. So it was pretty hard that everything has to happen. And I think this happens in other countries too. There's like uh there's I don't know if it's lack of definition of the position, things like that, but definitely different countries will bring more than what we imagine as an experience. And
Cool.
you are having now a new experience of bringing people back to the office, right? And how is that going? Like, because we had all the over the place, right? Go back to the office, come back, they go back home. Many people now are don't want to work from office anymore. They already build their own offices at home, and now they have to go back to office. And how is that part? Because that's I think is a really challenge that's it happens in your court, right? It's the engagement of people when they move back to the office. How is that going for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Because I think COVID changed people's perception so much of what they're willing to do, what's normal, right? Previously, before COVID, many of us would go into the office 5 days a week. We would dress up, we would get ourselves there, pay for parking, deal with traffic, all of that, and it was just kind of normal. But now that it's no longer feels normal to employees, I definitely think it's a detractor to engagement when companies start to bring people back in. But that doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do per se, because there's definitely some downsides too to having everybody be remote or having a hybrid where some people are remote and some are in the office. It just creates its own challenges. So I think for companies like ours who have done a 3 day a week mandate, it's definitely caused some ripple effect on employee engagement, and it's definitely caused some feedback to come back saying, we don't want this. Why are you doing this to us? But at the end of the day, I think as people settle in, their focus shifts to some of the other things that they were focused on pre-COVID, right? How do I grow my career? How do I advance? What do I do next in my journey, right? So
Mhm.
I think from our perspective, we're kind of settling into this new normal, but I know other companies are in different stages of their journey.
It's a challenge, right? because there's no right or wrong. This is what happening, right? It's like it's not just with the company you work in. Many companies are thinking about how to deal with. We know that, like an example, Webera, and it's a full remote company since the beginning. We never had an office, never had people working from home. And we have our challenges, like even with the tools that we have to manage, we see like how these people is not working, right? And it's hard because the timing to get maybe a bit is part of my fault too, because when we see that the person is not working, we take longer to take an action or things like that, even feedback and things like that. But there is this problem with remote work that we as a full remote company recognize, but the benefits for the ones who know how to work, like Rodrigo, myself, I think they're very good, right? Rodrigo can work from
Man,
Florianopolis
I,
or whatever you want.
a few weeks ago, I traveled with my family for the weekend. We went on a Thursday, and on a Friday, I was working, and I met one of our coworkers that were better, like co-working, and I was working with him. And I remember why I don't like working in an office. Not because I don't like the people, because the people are the good thing about it, but it took me like 20 minutes to write an email that would usually take me 4 minutes just because I was getting interrupted, you know? It's like, oh, look at this, look at that. I was like, okay. And then I don't know. I don't know if I could like adapt to work in an office again, but this is like for a different podcast. But definitely a challenge for you, right, Veronica?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think as the job market here in the US shifts and becomes more of an employer's market versus an employee's market, I think it changes the perspective too, right? Because during COVID, when we were seeing employees receive all kinds of job offers from all kinds of companies, right? It's different than today when people may not have the ability to switch roles if they want to or switch companies.
Can I ask you like a little bit of a strange question, Veronica? But if you had like a magic wand and you could change one thing like instantly about workplace dynamics, what would that be?
One thing, you want me to boil it all down into one? I would say that trust. Yeah, I mean, I think my old company, my first company that I worked at, used to say that trust is at the core of a lot of these cultural elements of companies, right? And I think it's trust in teams, trust in your leader, but also trust in the company itself. And so I think if there's one thing that I would build and one thing that I would focus on, it would be that. Now, granted, I also understand that trust is something that is a choice. And you can, do everything correctly, but it's up to each employee at the end of the day. Do they trust each other? Do they trust their boss? Do they trust the company? So I think that's at the core of it. And then, like I mentioned earlier, unlocking human potential, but I feel like that's not just one thing, that's many things rolled into one.
Yeah, one thing that I learned the other day about trust is I think it was for Simon Sinek. He was talking about how to get people to trust you. And he basically was saying when you ask for help is a way to get people to trust you. You create a connection that you trust on the other person to give you help, and then that person will end up trusting you too.
I guess you feel vulnerable if you ask for help, right? And like
Yeah,
vulnerability probably like
probably
is a good
about
path to
vulnerability.
motivate.
Yeah. So the other day, let me complicate the question. The other day, the NVIDIA CEO was talking about that HR of the future is IT because IT will be managing many agents that will be the future workers, right? I don't think we'll get that point. Like IT doesn't have anything to do with HR, but stretching out the conversation, how are you? How are you using and what's the impact that you see with AI on your work? And do you see a future where you have a AI worker or something like that, like he was
Yeah. And first
mentioning?
of all, I will say, yeah, I'm excited about AI. I think it has a great potential to help people to eliminate some of those boring tasks that are not truly human in nature and focus instead on the part of their work that gives them the most energy. Like I think about even just creating a PowerPoint deck using AI versus having to sit there and move all the boxes around and color code everything. That saves a bunch of time. Selfishly, I'm very excited for that to roll out at my company. But I would say too, with HR, there's a couple of things that I think will be really impactful. One is just HR services. So we already use a chatbot who helps people find information. And so that makes it just so much easier to do business with HR. So instead of having to sit on the phone and wait for someone to pick up, you can just go in, chat with the bot. The bot will give you your information, and you're off and running. You can do whatever you want with the rest of your time. But I think also AI can be used for coaching leaders. Like I mentioned earlier, I think leadership development is a huge priority for all companies right now. And one way that you can use AI is you can actually have a virtual coach that I could practice coaching my direct report with that coach as many times as I want in a safe space. And that will help me to develop that skill. It can even give me the feedback to say, here are some words you should consider using, or maybe you should pause more and listen more. So, and there's many other potential scenarios, right? In engagement, we can use AI as a way to help leaders come up with action plans based on their data and based on other data that we're seeing, such as their strengths. So, using AI can really enable us to be more effective, but also I think it can eliminate some of those boring and menial tasks that people don't look forward to doing, such as color coding the PowerPoint slide boxes.
Yeah, that is definitely a good point. Question. Do you have a question for us?
Yeah. I guess what can HR do for you all, right? As technologists, as business leaders, like what are your hopes and aspirations for the people who are helping to enable your talent?
What I think we want from HR, and Rodrigo can help me out here to see if that's true or not. It's someone who get the little good things about our culture and make them grow, and fix the bad things without telling they are completely wrong, because maybe they are the glue of the good things, right? I think that's one thing. And uh, I think that's what we want. We want someone that keeps us together, but without exposing our defects as a problem in a way. What do you think, Rodrigo?
I think it's a challenging question because the first thing that comes to mind is we are fully remote, and we've had in the past cases of like quiet quitting and people working different jobs while still working with us, and we could see the performance going down drastically, and we didn't really get, I think, from HR yet that quick action of like, hey, something is going on here, this person is quitting, we need to act on that. And that caused us many problems in this like what 4 years that I've been working with Joel. And I think what Joel also means is like we have a great culture, we trust people, and it's being challenging to kind of put those values to practice. And I don't know if this is HR like responsibility or not. Maybe it's everybody's, but yeah, I guess that like being close to the team, like identifying patterns that could like compromise projects alongside project managers and like other leaders. I guess that would be a good thing. And of course, helping exercise the culture, exercise the values, and make sure that people who are working with us are a match, like our cultural match. I think maybe that's the issue so far. The issues we had, I guess, they are like related to this not being a cultural match.
That's really good. I feel like I learned something new today from you all.
We definitely
No,
learned loads from you today,
we
Veronica.
definitely
Yeah.
learned. Yes. All right. So my Coke is almost finished.
Oh yeah, my beer too. How about your drink, Veronica? You still have some?
No, I've been talking. I've been talking a lot, so I haven't been sipping.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
So
you
we
can
have to
neck it
wait
now,
now.
right? No, I'm kidding. Yeah. All right.
All
Cool.
right.
Veronica, thank you so much for being here with us today. Hopefully, we can have you with us in another opportunity to talk like about maybe one of these specific topics. Right? Could like be a whole episode or like a series of episodes. So, thank you again. You're always welcome to join us. Thank you, Joe, as well.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you so much, Veronica. And yeah, appreciate it. I hope we can have you again in our podcast. Appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.